There's been a lot of chatter lately about free expression in Canada. Who gets it? Who doesn't? And where do we draw the line? For some, the rules are simple. If it isn't defamation or incitement, it should be allowed. But public sentiment seems to be in a very different place. On all sides of the political spectrum, Canadians are calling for more speech restrictions. From denying visas to musicians who make inflammatory political statements, to tightening protest zones around schools and places of worship. But there is one kind of speech restriction that we're not talking about so much: compelled speech. In Canada, it's not just what you can't say, but what you must say. We've been here before over pronouns. Once a polite gesture, now a legal imposition. The current thing obviously demands a new frontier, and today, that's land acknowledgements. On the show, I'm joined by Catherine Kronas and Queen's University law professor Bruce Pardy. Catherine is an elected parent council member in Ontario, and earlier this year, she asked that her respectful objection to land acknowledgements be included in the meeting minutes. That recording went viral, but so did the establishment reaction to it.
Hi, I'm Catherine Kronas, and I just wanted to say, as a parent member of the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board, I would like to emphasize that Principal does not speak on my behalf with regards to the land acknowledgement. In my view, the board's imposition of a land acknowledgement during our school council meetings undermines the democratic process and constitutes a form of compelled speech, which I believe contravenes the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. There is no school board policy mandating its inclusion. In my opinion, the sentiments implied by the land acknowledgement are political in nature, highly controversial, and therefore divisive and inappropriate within a government institution. And I respectfully request that my objection be noted in the minutes of this meeting.
A short while later, the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board suspended her from her elected role. Her objection was deemed harmful. Whatever your views on land acknowledgements, and regardless of your personal choice in reciting them in private, one question remains. Should land acknowledgements, or any form of political speech, be mandatory in political institutions? And should Canadians, even those elected by their peers, be removed from civic life for raising the question? The issue is much, much bigger than a school board drama. Are we creating a society where you can be punished, not for what you say, but for what you don't? I'm Melanie Bennet. This is Disrupted. I'm so pleased that you're joining me today. Catherine, for people who may not be aware of what's been going on with you, I was hoping that you could run us down a short, brief introduction to the recent controversy you've been involved in.
Sure. In a nutshell, I've been suspended from the school council of the Ancaster High School Council. I was suspended because I issued an objection in a meeting on April 9th. I issued a less than 50-second objection. I thought I was quite polite, and I was firm but polite. And what I did was object to the imposition of the land acknowledgement being imposed in our school council meeting.
And in that, a lot of people picked up on the part about the land acknowledgement. That seems to be a hot button topic right now for a lot of people. But to me, there are other interesting issues about this. The fact that you are an elected person, so you are elected on the parent council, that you are suspended for wanting to record an objection to political speech. And I think we need to talk about that a little bit more.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is why it's touched a nerve, and it's become a part of the national conversation at the moment. It seems that there's a lot of support for my position, which is I should be able to issue an objection to something which I feel is politically imposed in a council meeting. There's several layers with this. There's the first is that the board was imposing it on a school council meeting. So school councils actually were legislated to be advisory bodies and a apparatus to hold boards to account and to hold schools to account. So for the board to be imposing this in a school council meeting is, I think, overreach, and that's part of my objection. School councils should be able to determine what gets said in their meeting or not. And then there's the other issue with this being I think, a political creed that shouldn't be. Our government institutions should be neutral. We're taxpayers, and we have like a plural society, and not everybody's going to feel the same way. So we shouldn't have something that is imposed a particular ideological view.
Now, the JCCF has actually is now supporting you in a case wanting to be reinstated onto the board, and I'd be curious to hear from Bruce about some of the legal implications of this case.
Right. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, Catherine's objection, the statement that is in question, is a very reasonably stated, modest opinion. She took the opportunity during the board, the meeting of the parents' board, to state an opinion about the nature of the land acknowledgement that was being required of them. And that's all it was. I encourage people to go and have a look at it if they like. And so what's in question here is whether or not this institution can simply dictate the content of people's opinion and control whether or not they state those opinions. Now, let's be very clear about this. Catherine is not an employee of the board. She is a parent of a child going to school and was elected to the board. And as Catherine has alluded to, one of the purposes of these boards is to hold the board to account. So here's what the board is doing. The board is defining what it is that the parents are allowed to talk about. And it's absurd. It's an absurd situation. And I'm certainly glad that Catherine's lawyers have responded as they have, and it makes a lot of sense. But the situation is absurd. It's a reflection of the degree to which institutions have been compromised. They're infiltrated. We keep saying this. The institutions are infiltrated. They're taken over by an ideology. This is a spectacularly clear example of just that. This is the board defining what kinds of opinions you are allowed to have and restricting parents' ability to speak those opinions in a mild, respectful, reasonable way on the record. And so you would like to think that this is a no-brainer, but the system the way it is right now, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, so one of the things that struck me is that this is a question of conscience, right? So as far as I understand, the Constitution gives people the right to have their own opinions. It's the freedom of religion and conscience. But in this case, it would seem even if the board had a policy that mandated land acknowledgements, which I don't believe that it has, and Catherine, you could correct me if I'm wrong here, but even if it had a policy to mandate this kind of political speech or any political speech, that would perhaps go against, the freedom of conscience element of our own Constitution.
Well, imagine this. Imagine that the board did have such a policy. I mean, it actually doesn't, but let's say that it did. Let's say it was board policy that at every single meeting held under its auspices, there was to be a land acknowledgement recited. Okay? Even if that was the case, it must be okay for someone to put their hand up and say, I actually don't agree. I don't agree that this is right. That is the mark of a free country. If you are not allowed to dissent from the laws, even if it's a law, and it's not a law in this case, the policy doesn't exist. But if it did, if there was a law that said you have to do this, let me give you an example. Outside of this area, if there's a law that says, you have to drive under a certain limit on the highway, well, then you have to drive under a certain limit on the highway. But you are allowed to say, actually, I don't agree with the law. I'm doing it, but I don't agree with it. You're allowed to say that. Everybody is allowed to dissent from the content of the law, to say they do not agree. And that is the thing that Catherine is being punished for expressing an opinion that this practice is not even a policy, that this practice that somehow the principal or the board is insisting upon is not a good idea.
Right. And just if I could just interject just a little bit about this, the fact that it's not a policy. This is very important because in HWDSB and school boards throughout the province, they have a policy procedure for, these policies, as Bruce said, are ultimately like the laws of the board. And they have to go through public consultation. And so they haven't done that in this case. There hasn't been any board of elected trustees determining this policy at the board table, which would be like send out notice to the community that this was going to be a policy. They haven't done that. They have ushered this in, sort of de facto, and it's become customary, and nobody's pushing back on this. Even though I'm aware of other people, other parents, other community members in Ancaster and throughout other boards throughout the province that have an issue with these land acknowledgements, is because people are totally afraid and have been cowed into just accepting them and not being pushed back, not pushing back.
One other thing that I find really interesting is, as far as I understand, a parent council is there to hold a board to account on various issues, which is, they're there to help govern, sort of like trustees. Trustees are meant to hold the board accountable for various things. But in this case, it wasn't the parent council that suspended you, it was the board that suspended you. And legally speaking, I don't know what that means or what it implies, but it would seem that if you were to be suspended for whatever reason, if you'd broken some policy, so on and so forth, then that should come from the council and not the board.
Correct. In my view, the board is in violation of the Education Act, which gives, again, councils the ability to self-govern through, in fact, it's the Education Act that recommends school councils develop bylaws. And in our bylaws, we have a conflict resolution process that the chairs are responsible to do. So what the board has done is they've come in, and we still don't know what the complaint is exactly. They haven't cited any particular part in a code of conduct. They haven't told me what the harm is. Again, they've claimed harm. Somebody's claimed harm. We don't even know if it's the board that's claiming harm or if it's an individual has gone to the board. We are still waiting. It's actually been a month since the lawyer has sent out the demand letter. We sent it out on June 4th. It's now July 4th. And we still have not heard any response from the board.
And let's just be very clear about what they mean by harm. Right? So this is the alleged harm that has resulted from Catherine expressing an opinion. And this is the nature of the ideology we're talking about. Right? They are defining for all of us, or attempting to, what is an acceptable opinion to hold. And if you wander outside of that window, then they're going to claim that by holding an opinion contrary to what they've decided, that you are causing other people harm. Okay? This is untenable in a country that claims to be free. This is not the way a free country works. And yes, in this country, it is, as Catherine has alluded to, people are reticent to speak their mind because everything has become a punishment for crossing this imaginary line where you're not allowed to think and say things that the authorities don't approve of. This is becoming serious. We have crossed some kind of a threshold in this country, and people have lost their courage to say what it is that they think. Like Catherine, I know a lot of people who do not agree with all this nonsense, but they are extremely reluctant to say so out loud. That sounds like East Germany. not Canada.
Yes, Bruce, if you take a look at my objection again, the video that I posted on Twitter, you might hear faintly in the background the sound of cracking eggshells because I got tired of walking on them.
Right.
And I will say that there's a lot of tension. There is a culture of fear, even within, like at a school council level. You shouldn't have to be terrified to make criticism, like be critical. You shouldn't have to be, and here's the thing with what happened to me. The suspension came as a shock because in a former meeting in February 11th, we had another council meeting. And at that meeting, there was discussion. This is when we were going to adopt our bylaws. Bylaws, by the way, which include a clause for respect for diverse opinions. Sure. And I was pushing them on, like, do you actually believe this? I was expressing fear. I was worried that it wasn't a safe place for classical liberal and conservative parents or community members to be able to voice their views. And I was assured at that meeting that this was a free speech place, that parents should be able to push back, that nobody's ever stopped us before. And so I took that as, okay, so I should be able to issue this objection, keep it brief and non-disruptive, and just be able to move on. So yes, I was very shocked when I received the suspension, because everything that I have done was trying to avoid a suspension.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you want, we could put it this way. So institutions, authorities will take and exercise whatever power the people give them. Mm-hmm. And so in a way, yes, we can say, the fault in all of this, if you want to put it that way, lies at the feet of the board. I mean, they have taken a step now which is egregious and untenable. It cannot stand. It's an outrageous case. However, we should also add, though, in a sense, the real fault is all the spineless people who will not say what they think. It's all those people who will hide behind the silence, have thoughts in their heads, and not be willing to express them. Because if all those people did otherwise, this kind of thing would not be able to happen. Because the weight of opinion would be against it, and the authorities would not dare to act in this kind of outrageous way. And so there is lots of blame in this to go around.
Yes, and I would also add that the council members themselves, I'm completely alienated from the council. I don't feel comfortable reaching out to them and talking about this matter for obvious reasons. But I would expect them to be advocating for my reinstatement, because part of their duty as council members, and as legislated by the Education Act, is to hold the education system to account, or to enhance the accountability of the education system. Which means, and they're also expected to act with honesty and integrity as per our bylaws. So I would expect that even if they disagree with my position on the land acknowledgement, they should be fighting for their own autonomy as a council and say, look, we can deal with this. Let's get back to our bylaws and our conflict resolution process. And we don't need your help. In fact, you're overreaching. This is out of your
wheelhouse.
Yes,
out of your bailiwick. It's out of your jurisdiction, out of your authority. Right? Catherine and the other members of the Parents' Council are not board employees. They are not subject to the directions of the principal or the head of the board. They are free agents. They are parents of children going to these schools. They are allowed to have their own opinions. They are allowed to state those opinions. And if in fact these parent boards are under the thumb of these boards, well, then they mean nothing, because they're all being directed and instructed about how to behave and what to think and what to say. That makes no sense. There's no reason for them to exist.
Correct. It is the job of the council members to ensure that the Education Act is being followed. Part of the Education Act is for parent councils to be able to advise the school and or the board on any matter. It doesn't say any matter except for topics that we find very controversial and difficult to talk about. It says any matter. So the council is going against their own best interests by not supporting me at least on this. If that's the case, I actually don't know one way or the other what's happening.
Yeah, it really does seem that the parent council is becoming an enforcement body for the bureaucracy, in this case, the school boards more than anything else. So according to either one of you, how would you like to see this go? What would be a good solution in a free society?
Okay. I think that if the board decides to overturn its decision, which they doubled down because we sent the letter out and then they didn't let me, I missed a meeting, I wasn't able to go to a meeting. If they reinstate me onto council, that would send, I think that I would hope that parents throughout the board would breathe a bit of a sigh of relief, knowing that, you know what, we should be able to speak and what they did to her was wrong. And so I think that that's what I'm looking for, is my reinstatement back on council.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me. I mean, a little part of me hopes that the council continues to double down. Their position is so outrageous. This is such a great case. It's ridiculous. We have to see what happens if it ever gets to a courtroom. But I mean, really, the statement in question is of such a nature that it is a blatant restriction of freedom of expression. And the board, of course, is part of government. It is subject to the charter. It's a perfect illustration of the overreach of petty functionaries inside a school board. And so part of me hopes it goes all the way, and the whole thing will. I mean, it's already blown up, but I hope it will get ever bigger to demonstrate not only that this is not appropriate or legal, but that this is the way that some of our institutions are now behaving.
Yeah, international eyes are certainly on Canada on this particular issue, and Catherine's story is ongoing. So it'll be interesting to see what develops. Will the school board and parent council double down, or will they relent? I guess we'll see. But I appreciate Catherine and Bruce, both of you, coming onto the show to discuss some legal implications in this case.
Sure thing.
Thanks, Melanie.
All right, thank you, guys. Does Canada value individual conscience? If the moment a citizen steps outside the boundaries of accepted moral orthodoxy, these principles are quietly set aside. Catherine Kronas wasn't disruptive. She didn't insult or demean. She simply disagreed. She questioned the rules. That was enough to warrant institutional sanctions. Dissent, it seems, has become synonymous with misconduct. This is how speech control operates across the modern West. Through the bureaucracy, through soft, moralistic exclusion, through the normalization of ideological compliance in civic life. If elected citizens can be removed for objecting to compelled speech, are we simply managing heresy? For me, the future of a free society should not depend on agreement. Rather, it should depend on allowing citizens the space to disagree. I'm Melanie Bennet. Join me next week on Disrupted.